I never thought I'd be the guy writing about how my wife, Emily, completely shattered everything I believed about us during what was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life, my sister's wedding. We've been married for 6 years, and I honestly thought we had a pretty good thing going. Sure, we had our fights like any couple, but overall, I figured we were solid. Emily had always been a bit bitchy, a little high maintenance, but that's just who she was. She liked to be in control, and she could be very manipulative, but I loved her, and I thought she loved me too. Looking back, though, there were subtle signs of trouble. She was more secretive than usual, hiding her phone a lot, deleting texts, making excuses when I asked her who she was texting. She'd get defensive, roll her eyes, call me paranoid. That should have been a red flag, but I kept telling myself she was just stressed or tired. I never wanted to believe she could cheat on me, especially not with my best friend, Jake. That felt like a betrayal I'd never recover from. But I was about to find out the truth. In the worst way possible. It was the day of my sister's wedding, beautiful ceremony, everyone happy, and I was proud to stand there giving my toast. I'd written something heartfelt, trying to keep it together, but underneath I was nervous. Emily was sitting next to me, rubbing my back, acting all sweet and supportive. I looked out at my family, friends, and most importantly at Emily, who was all smiles, pretending everything was perfect. I remember thinking how lucky I was, how nothing could ruin this moment. Then, right in the middle of my speech, I saw her, or rather I saw what she was doing. She was sitting on her phone like she always did, but this time she was texting someone I didn't recognize. I caught a glimpse of her screen when she accidentally left it open for just a second. The message was from Jake. It said, "Can't wait tonight, babe, let's make it unforgettable." My stomach dropped. I froze. The words echoed in my mind as I kept speaking, but I couldn't focus. My heart pounding, I looked directly at her, and she looked back with this falsely innocent expression, like she'd been caught stealing. Candy, I didn't say anything right away. I just kept my eyes on her, feeling my face turn red, my hands trembling. I wanted to scream, to run over and yank that phone out of her hand, but I forced myself to keep calm. After the toast, I excused myself, pretending everything was normal, but inside I was losing my mind. I went straight to the hotel room we had booked for the night, Emily and I knew I couldn't ignore what I already knew. She had been lying for months, hiding things, sneaking around behind my back, and I had no idea. Now I had proof, and I was sickened by how deep her betrayal went. I waited until she got back to the room, and when she did, I confronted her. Her smile faded instantly when I called her out on the texts. She tried to deny it, said it was nothing, just some stupid joke between friends. She told me Jake was just joking around, that I was overreacting, that I was being paranoid. Of course, she was furious with me for spying, calling me insecure, but I wasn't blind anymore. The more she lied, the angrier I got. I felt betrayed, humiliated, like everything I thought I knew about her was a lie. That was just the beginning, though. I knew I had to figure out a way to get revenge, to make her feel the pain she'd caused me. I wasn't going to let her get away with it that easily. After I confronted Emily with the texts, she hit me with all her usual bullshit, saying Jake was just a buddy, that I was reading too much into their friendship, that she'd never cheat on me, and that I was just being paranoid because I didn't trust her. She called me insecure, jealous, even manipulative for suspecting her. I remember her smirking, acting like she was the victim, like I was the crazy one for even questioning her. Honestly, I was so overwhelmed with rage, heartbreak, and confusion that I didn't even know what to say next. I just stared at her, feeling the blood rush to my head. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing over everything I just uncovered. I felt so stupid for not seeing the signs earlier, for ignoring the gut feelings. I kept replaying the moment I saw her texting Jake, the way her face changed the second I looked at her. I thought about all the times she'd lied about where she was going, who she was with, and how she'd gloss over it with some bullshit excuse. It hit me like a punch in the gut. I'd been so blind, so trusting, and now I was stuck with this sinking feeling that I'd wasted years of my life on someone who was just using me. The next morning, I decided I needed to do some digging. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I knew I had to find out how deep this thing went. I started by checking her phone, her emails, her social media. It was all there. More messages, more photos, even hotel reservations she'd booked for business trips that I now realized were just cover stories. She'd been lying about her whereabouts for months. She'd been sneaking around with Jake, probably even more than I suspected. It made me sick to think about the countless nights she was probably with him, sharing sex, sharing secrets, while I was at home, clueless and vulnerable. I also discovered she'd been telling her friends. I was overly controlling, that I didn't let her have any freedom. That was a lie. I wasn't perfect, but I was trying to be a good husband. But she'd spun a web of lies and everyone believed her. Her whole act was so convincing. Her bitchy attitude, her mock innocence, her constant manipulation. I started to see her for what she really was, a selfish, lying, manipulative woman who'd been using me as her personal ATM and emotional support, all while she was out having sex with my best friend. By that afternoon, I was ready to blow. I couldn't keep this bottled up anymore. I knew I had to confront her again, but this time I was determined to get to the truth. I wanted her to admit everything, to see the damage she'd done. I sat her down, looked her straight in the eyes, and told her I knew everything about the texts, the hotel, the lies. She still denied, of course, trying to play innocent. Said she had no idea how the texts got there, that she'd never cheat on me, that it was just Jake messing around. She was so damn good at lying, it was almost laughable. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I saw through her bullshit. That night I felt this mix of rage and despair I'd never experienced before. The idea that my wife, the woman I loved and trusted, had been cheating on me with my best friend, sharing sex, lies, and secrets behind my back, it was like my world was crumbling. I couldn't focus on anything else. The betrayal was so visceral, so raw, I wanted to scream. I started thinking about revenge. Not just to hurt her, but to make her feel what I was feeling, like I'd been punched in the stomach, kicked in the teeth all at once. I knew I couldn't just walk away, not without making her understand what she'd lost, what she'd really done. And so I started planning how I was going to turn this around, how I was going to make her regret every lie, every betrayal. But before I could do anything, I had to calm down and figure out what my next move was. I didn't want to react impulsively and ruin everything, but I also knew waiting wasn't an option anymore. I had to strike back somehow, with precision. I was all ready, thinking about ways to expose her, publicly if I had to, or maybe just to her friends and family. I wanted her to feel the shame, the humiliation, and above all, the pain of knowing I'd caught her. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity, taking control of a situation where I'd been utterly blindsided. I was angry at her, yes, but I was also pretty damn hurt. Like the kind of hurt that makes you question everything you ever believed about love, trust, and loyalty. I trusted her with everything. She'd lied, cheated, and played me like a fool. And now I was ready to fight back. The next few days were a blur of planning and trying to keep my cool. I knew I had to be smart about this. I didn't want to go nuclear right away, but I also couldn't let her get away with her lies. I started collecting more evidence, snooping through her email, taking screenshots of messages, even tracking her phone location when I could. Every little detail added to the picture. Her secret trips, late nights, the hotel reservations she'd been trying to hide. It was disgusting how much she'd lied, how deeply she'd betrayed me. One thing I couldn't believe was how bitchy she'd become when I brought up her lies. She'd always been bitchy, but now it was like she was on the defensive 24/7. Every time I asked her a question, she'd snap back with some snarky remark or outright denial. She'd call me paranoid, insecure, obsessively jealous, like I was the problem for even suspecting her. But I knew better than that. I saw the evidence, and I knew she'd been lying from the start. Then came the night I decided I'd had enough. I sat her down again and laid everything out, proof of the texts, the hotel reservations, the secret messages. Her reaction was pure chaos. She yelled, called me a crazy, jealous husband, said I was inventing things because I was insecure and had trust issues. She accused me of spying, of trying to control her, and then she looked me dead in the eyes, sneered, and said, "You're overreacting." Maybe if you paid more attention to me, you wouldn't have to accuse me of stuff all the time. That really hit me hard. That was her way of turning it around, making me feel like I was the one at fault for catching her. I felt my blood boil. I'd never been so angry. I remember just sitting there, speechless for a moment because I was trying to process how someone I loved, someone I thought loved me, could turn into this manipulative, lying monster. I thought about everything we'd been through, the good times, the bad, the shared dreams, and realized it was all a lie. She'd been lying about everything, and the worst part was, she didn't even seem sorry. She was just angry that I found out that I was exposing her. That's when I knew I needed to do something more than just confront her. I had to plan my revenge carefully. I started thinking about how I could make her regret everything. I didn't want to just leave her, not yet. I wanted her to feel the guilt, the shame, the loss. I wanted her to know I wasn't some sucker she could control or lie to anymore. I began gathering information on her contacts, her social media, her friends, especially the ones she was close to that I could use to my advantage. I knew she'd spin stories, try to manipulate the truth, but I was determined to be the one in control now. If she wanted to lie and cheat, I was going to make sure she paid for it in ways she'd never forget. One thing I realized pretty quickly was how much she hated losing control. She always had to be the one calling the shots, the center of attention, the queen bee. That's when I started to lay the groundwork for my plan. I'd make her believe she was still in charge, but secretly, I was setting traps. I knew she'd try to spin her way out of this, so I had to outmaneuver her at her own game. I contacted some of my more discreet friends, people I knew wouldn't judge me, just to get some advice, maybe gather some dirt on her side of the story. I didn't want to do anything reckless, but I knew that if I played my cards right, I could turn this whole betrayal around, make her regret ever crossing me. It was a strange feeling, really. I'd always been the quiet, reserved type, not the vengeful kind, but now I was in full-on execution mode. I was plotting how to confront her again. Only this time I'd have the upper hand. I wanted her to see that she couldn't manipulate me anymore, that her lies had consequences. I was angry, yes, but beneath that anger was a deep, cold resolve. I wasn't just going to walk away from this mess. I was going to make damn sure she knew what she'd lost, what she'd destroyed with her selfishness and her lies. As I sat there, piecing everything together, I realized I was no longer the naive husband I was a week ago. I'd been betrayed by the woman I loved, my best friend, and my own trust. But if there's one thing I learned, it's this. Betrayal can be a powerful motivator. It can turn someone into something they never thought they'd be. And I was about to show her exactly what that looked like. The moment I decided to execute my plan, I knew I had to be meticulous. Emily was cunning, and I couldn't afford for her to catch me off guard. I started by setting up some surveillance, nothing overt, just enough to keep tabs on her whereabouts and her interactions. I installed some discreet tracking apps on her phone, just enough to see her location and confirm what I already suspected. She was really sneaking around, not just with Jake, but with others too. All those late nights and secret trips suddenly made sense. She'd been lying to me every step of the way, and I felt a mixture of disgust and determination. Meanwhile, Emily kept up her act, acting like the perfect wife, the victim, the innocent victim of my supposed insecurities. She'd throw tantrums if I brought up her lies, calling me paranoid, accusing me of spying on her. She'd say I was just jealous because I couldn't handle her success or her independence, but I wasn't buying her bullshit anymore. I saw her for what she really was, a manipulative bitch who thought she could run my life and get away with everything. One night, I decided it was time for the big move. I arranged for her to be out of town for a few hours, under the guise of a business meeting she'd told me about. I knew she'd be with Jake or someone else, so I took the opportunity to do some serious digging. I broke into her email account, found even more proof of her affairs, messages where she bragged about their sexcapades, how she loved the thrill of sneaking around, and how she was finally free with Jake. The texts were explicit, dirty, and showed a level of betrayal I'd never thought possible from someone I'd called my wife. Reading those messages was like getting punched in the gut all over again. I felt sick, disgusted at her, furious at her, and most of all, heartbroken that I'd been so blind. I couldn't believe she'd been lying to my face for months, playing the perfect wife while secretly sharing sex and secrets with Jake. It was like my entire life had been a lie. I wondered how many nights she'd spent in that hotel with him, how many times they'd shared a bed I'd thought was ours. I knew I had to confront her, but I also realized I couldn't do it alone. I started reaching out to some of her closest friends, people she trusted, people she'd probably told her lies to. I needed witnesses, allies, someone who could back up what I was about to say. I wanted her to see the truth from people she trusted, because I knew she'd try to spin this in her favor if I just went alone. I wanted her to feel the full weight of her betrayal, public, undeniable, and humiliating. When she finally came back the next morning, I was ready. I had everything laid out, screenshots, messages, her hotel receipts, everything. I didn't want her to deny anymore. I was tired of her lies, her bitchy attitude, her manipulative sneers. I told her I knew everything. She tried to deny again, claiming I was crazy, that I was just jealous, that I was imagining things. But I cut her off. I told her I had proof of her sex, her lies, her deception. Her face turned pale, her eyes darted around, trying to come up with some excuse, some way out. But I was done listening. That confrontation was intense. She yelled, called me names, said I was a controlling, insecure bastard who didn't appreciate her. She threw a tantrum, calling me paranoid and saying I was the crazy one for accusing her of cheating. But I'd had enough. I looked right at her and said, "You think you're so smart, so clever, but you're just a liar and a cheater. I know everything, Emily, and I'm not going to let you manipulate me anymore." The words felt like a punch to her ego, and for the first time I saw her falter. She realized I wasn't backing down. That day, I made a decision. I wasn't going to stay with her anymore, not after what I'd found out. But I didn't want her to think I was just giving up. I wanted her to see that I could be just as manipulative as she was, except for my own reasons. I started planning my revenge in earnest. I wanted her to feel the guilt, the shame, and the loss she'd caused me. I wanted her to realize that her lies, her sex with Jake, and her constant deception had consequences. I was going to show her that I could destroy her world just as she tried to destroy mine. So I started making moves. I contacted my lawyer, started looking into divorce options. I also reached out to Jake, who was surprisingly unrepentant, just as much a liar and manipulator as Emily. I told him I knew everything, and I warned him that I'd be exposing him too. I wanted her to see how her actions had consequences, and I was ready to make her pay. I wasn't just angry, I was determined. This betrayal had broken something inside me, but it also ignited a fire. I'd be damned if I let her walk all over me and get away with it. The days that followed were a whirlwind. I kept collecting evidence, making plans, and trying to keep my head straight amid the chaos. Emily's attitude didn't change much. She still acted like she was the victim, throwing tantrums, calling me paranoid, and trying to spin her lies even more. But I was already steps ahead. I'd leaked snippets of her messages to a few friends who I knew wouldn't side with her, just enough to make her realize her carefully crafted image was crumbling. I wanted her to feel the panic, the fear of losing everything she'd built on lies. One night I arranged a surprise meeting with some of her closest friends, people she'd always trusted, people who believed in her. I played it cool, acted like I was just trying to talk things out. But in reality, I was exposing her little secrets, showing them the evidence I'd gathered, watching her friends' faces. As I laid out her lies, her sex messages with Jake, their hotel reservations, her fake stories that was satisfying, I saw the shock, the disbelief, and a bit of anger from some of them. It was exactly what I wanted. I could see the cracks forming in her perfect little world, and it was glorious. Meanwhile, Emily went hysterical. She called me every name in the book, accused me of stalking and ruining her reputation. She threw a fit, crying, pleading, trying to manipulate her friends into defending her, but it was too late. They saw her for what she was, the lying, manipulative bitch I'd always suspected. She tried to turn her friends against me, calling me a jealous, insecure man who had no right to invade her privacy. But they weren't buying it anymore. The trust was gone and she knew it. Her reaction only fueled my determination. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about justice. I realized I had to finalize the divorce, get everything legally settled, and make sure she paid for the damage she'd done. I wanted her to lose everything: her reputation, her marriage, her sense of control. I also decided I'd go after Jake in a more direct way. I'd already warned him, but now I was thinking about exposing him publicly, posting all the evidence online, making sure everyone knew what kind of man he really was. I wanted to destroy his reputation as a loyal friend, just like Emily's. One afternoon, I finally sat her down and told her I was filing for divorce. Her face twisted in anger and she started screaming, calling me everything from a jealous psycho to a desperate loser. But I didn't care anymore. I was numb, really. I'd spent so much time planning, gathering evidence, and trying to keep a cool head that I was more tired than anything else. I told her I knew about the sex, the lies, everything. How she'd been lying about her trips, her meetings, her friendship with Jake. That was the last straw. I told her she could pack her bags because she was no longer welcome in my life. The day she moved out was oddly anticlimactic. She tried to guilt-trip me, saying I was throwing away a good wife, that she loved me and didn't mean to cheat, that she was just confused. But I knew better. I knew she'd been manipulative, dishonest, and selfish. Watching her walk out that door, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. I was hurt, definitely, but I also felt free. Free from the lies, the betrayal, and the fake smile she always wore. I realized that I'd been clinging to a fantasy, a version of her that never really existed. Looking back, I see now how much this experience has changed me. I'll never trust her again, and I doubt I'll ever fully recover from the betrayal. But I've learned something important. Trust isn't given lightly anymore, and people show their true colors eventually. I also learned that revenge, when carefully planned, can restore your sense of control and dignity. I don't regret what I did because I ended up with clarity and strength I never knew I had. For anyone going through something similar, my advice is simple. Don't ignore the signs. Trust your instincts, gather evidence, and don't be afraid to take control of the situation. You deserve honesty and respect, and if someone betrays you, you have every right to fight back, whether that means exposing them, leaving them, or both. Because in the end, the truth always comes out. And the ones who lie and cheat, they usually end up paying the price. After everything, I've come to realize that betrayal cuts deep, but it also reveals who people really are. Emily's lies, her manipulations, her sex with Jake, that all shattered the illusion I had of us. But oddly enough, it also set me free. Freed me from the weight of her deception and from the false sense of security I'd been holding onto for years. I never thought I'd be the guy to find myself in this situation, but here I am. Stronger, wiser, and more cautious about who I let into my life. I still feel the sting of her betrayal. Sometimes it hits me out of nowhere like a punch in the chest. I wonder how I didn't see it coming, how I was so blind. But I also know I did the right thing by facing the truth head-on. I refused to be a victim anymore. Instead, I took control, made her see that her lies and sex with Jake couldn't hide the fact that she was a selfish, manipulative woman who only cared about herself. And I made sure. She paid a price. Looking back, I see the lesson clearly. Trust is fragile, and some people will do anything to destroy it if they think they can get away with it. But no matter how much they lie or manipulate, the truth always has a way of coming out. Sometimes it's ugly, sometimes it's painful, but it's necessary. Because only then can you start to rebuild, to move on. I'm still healing, still trying to forget the pain, but I know I'll be okay in the end. For anyone else dealing with betrayal, I hope you find the strength to face it. Don't let someone's lies define you. Stand up, gather your evidence, and take action, whether that's confronting them, exposing them, or walking away. You deserve better than lies, sex, and manipulation. Never forget that. Trust your instincts, listen to your gut, and remember that the truth, as brutal as it may be, will set you free. And in the aftermath, you'll find a way to heal, stronger than ever before.